So, welcome. Today I am joined by Miloš Karavezić from Serbia. He is the first secretary of the Young Communist League of Yugoslavia. And we will be talking about the situation that is going on in Serbia right now with protests against the government and talk a bit about the context and what might be expected to come next of this situation. So, welcome. Thanks for joining me. To begin, before we get into the incident with the protests, to give a general overview of the landscape of politics in Serbia, can you briefly describe what is the situation in Serbia politically right now, and specifically how would you characterize the current president and his party or movement, Vučić, politically in terms of both domestic politics and international politics and imperialism?
First of all, greetings to you and your viewers, and thank you for an opportunity to join this podcast. The political situation in Serbia is very interesting, especially within the context of Europe, since we are the only country in Europe currently that is not in the completely line of the West. And that is not thanks to the current government, but mostly thanks to the historical developments. As your viewers might know, Serbia and Montenegro, which were at that time part of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, were bombed by NATO in 1999, and our country at the time resisted the hegemony of the Western imperialism for the most time. So when the Eastern Bloc collapsed, when the Soviet Union was dismantled, of course the socialist Yugoslavia was also dismantled by the Western imperialism, but there was a country led by President Slobodan Milošević that he wasn't a socialist, he was a social democrat, but it had anti-imperialist position and was resisting the influences by the West. Therefore, the bombardment of Yugoslavia was not because of the rights of Albanian people or because of Yugoslavia being aggressive, but mostly to subjugate this territory and also to show that no alternative to the Western imperialism is permitted. Basically, our current political landscape is shaped by the NATO aggression, also by 2000 Contra-revolution. After that revolution, these remains of socialism were dismantled, and basically, ever since year 2000, we have neoliberal governments that are trying to privatize as much as possible, to sell public companies, and therefore the current government is the continuation of all previous governments that existed since the year 2000. Our current ruling party, the Serbian Progressive Party, although doesn't have anything to do with progressivism, came to power in 2012, and basically it managed to consolidate power. It managed to unite Serbian bourgeoisie as well as mafia and parts of the underground and some shady, some gray area business people, and they managed to create a kind of hegemony within Serbian politics. Some people may argue that the Serbian Progressive Party is more anti-imperialist, in a sense that Serbia, for example, didn't impose sanctions on Russia, or that Serbia has good relations with the East, with China, and so on. But the essence of And yes, there are multiple parties in this coalition. But in its essence, Serbian Progressive Party, first of all, it is a neoliberal party oriented towards attracting foreign investors, oriented towards diminishing workers' rights, students' rights, and so on. But also, its essence is pro-Western and neoliberal. So the majority of the bourgeoisie has great connections with the West, and the West, especially nowadays, the USA ambassador in Serbia, Christopher Hill, are very supportive of our government.
But what I can tell from the current government from a distance is it seems to me to be ideologically more a sort of national conservative government, which is not in the socialist camp, but it's also not entirely in the ideologically in the Western liberal camp, I think. And in a lot of instances, it seems to me that when a country is under attack for a long time, that the politics of, even if it used to be a progressive anti-imperialist country, that the politics tends to retreat into sort of national conservative ideology as a way to, you could say, self-preserve. Because if you also judge by the support among the population, among the different parties, the anti-imperialist or leftist parties are very small, I believe, and the ruling party seems to have majority support, or at least plurality support among the population. Can you say something about why that is?
Yes, so it's true. Basically, the main ideology is national conservatism, and the Serbian Progressive Party is part of European People's Party. So together with for example, Christian Democrats in Germany, or with Fidesz from Hungary, the party of Viktor Orban.
They were kicked out, but that's a different story.
Yes, but like historically, they were also part, and our president has very good relations with Orban. But that's like that is what is a nominal ideology. But we must take into account that the Serbian Progressive Party gathers everybody. So you have a lot of different people that came from previous ruling parties, from the Serbian Radical Party, which is right-wing party, and actually current ruling party is a split off from it. Basically, yes, the nationalist ideology is, and this national conservative ideology is very present in Serbia. The fortunate thing is that openly pro-Western, openly pro-EU or pro-NATO politics doesn't hold within the Serbian population. That's a good thing. But why the Serbian Progressive Party has such power is, at least in my opinion, largely due to economic factors. So one thing is that after the deindustrialization, we have lost a majority of the working class. A lot of people in Serbia today are kind of petite bourgeoisie, or somewhere between petite bourgeoisie and proletarians, and the working class, the industry is now very weakened. The trade unions are a lot of times corrupted and doesn't actually fight for the workers. Especially young people don't have this view of syndicalism, and the national conservative ideology. Also, the fact that the ruling party managed to achieve some economic growth and some stability, which they very focus on. I think these two factors are the biggest reason why they managed to hold power for now 20 years, 12 years.
And you mentioned pro-NATO or pro-EU politics not really being at least explicit in Serbia. How do people in Serbia view NATO? So, of course, it's a bit of a rhetorical question because there's stereotypes about this. So to what extent is this anti-NATO sentiment that Serbia is famous for universal or near universal? And how do people in Serbia view the relationship between the EU and NATO? Because, of course, Serbia does have candidate membership status or is trying to get it for the EU.
Yes. For the EU, we have candidate membership status right now. Let's first talk about NATO. So, majority of population are aware what NATO is. Of course, a lot of population, especially the older ones, remember the bombardment, and people realize that NATO is currently occupying Kosovo and Metohija. So, generally, very small, insignificant part of population has positive views on NATO. The problematic thing is that a lot of people don't know that, for example, our country is a member of Partnership for Peace, which is like NATO extended, and that even the NATO office is opened in in Belgrade, in the same building that NATO bombed during 1999. It's general stuff. So a lot of people don't know that, but generally they see NATO as a threat to the world peace, and also our people sympathize a lot with countries like Cuba, right, like Russia, DPRK, Venezuela, and so on. So we have this anti-imperialist, anti-NATO sentiment based mostly on our experience with imperialism.
Right. And sorry, go ahead.
Yes, sorry. Yeah. So for the European Union, it's a little bit different because in after year 2000, we were promised that once we enter the European Union, we will be like Germany. Like a lot of time, Germany and Austria were like countries that we should look up to. That was the sentiment in Serbia, and basically, generation of my parents, for example, believed that once we join the EU, everything will be good. Fortunately, the EU approval rate is now falling due to, again, European Union having a very colonial attitude towards Serbia, but also due to the fact that people now see that even in Europe there are problems, and it's not. It isn't the fact that everything is good in Europe and that people are living some kind of utopia.
Right. And earlier you mentioned deindustrialization as well. So there used to be, I guess, under Yugoslavia, when it was a socialist country, a lot of industry because of socialist industrialization policies. And to what extent has this deindustrialization been implemented? So, of course, we've seen this across the former Soviet Union as well. That also, does that relate to how people view the EU and this like privatizations and stuff? Because, of course, EU accession means to privatize, in other words, prostitute your economy to financial investors in Western Europe.
Yes, so basically in the time of socialist Yugoslavia, we were very production oriented. Basically, we produced everything from cars to food to other industrial outputs and so on. Every city in Serbia had several factories, and that were the factories that had several thousands people employed. Unfortunately, our economy today, after the industrialization, is based on one hand on services. So a lot of people from Serbia work from services, myself included, because we work for foreign clients. In my case, designing high voltage substations, or we produce half products like I don't know, car cables or tires or some other stuff that we cannot sell. That is not a final product. People are aware, especially the older people are aware of all the bad effects of privatizations. A lot of people lost their jobs. But the problem is that because of the intensive anti-public sector propaganda, let's say, anti-state companies propaganda, majority of people still believe that the flaws that existed in socialism are inherent and that this is something that we cannot solve out. Younger people, people that are entering the workforce right now even don't remember these old big companies, and that is also problematic because a lot of times they cannot see the alternative, because private companies that are much smaller than what it was in the time of socialism, are the only thing they know about. And okay, the public, like I don't know, public transport companies or some other companies that stayed in the hands of the state, a lot of people view them as inefficient, also because there is a lot of party bureaucracy and a lot of corruption within these companies that remained in the hands of the country.
Okay, so a large part of the population has actually been convinced of the need to further privatize and liberalize the economy.
Yes, basically they do not support privatization on itself, but they don't see, they don't have a willingness to fight against it.
Right,
That's the main problem.
right. And in terms of international relations, you also touched upon this a little bit earlier, but so there's this sort of balancing act between moving towards the West and being critical of NATO and being sympathetic towards countries that are under attack from imperialism. So, firstly, to what extent, because you said this is felt among the population, but to what extent is this also reflected in government? So, solidarity towards Cuba, towards the DPRK, etc. And secondly, how much do relations with Russia and with China as well play a role in the foreign policy of Serbia today? Because we know, like, Serbia is not in the Russian camp per se, in the sense that they do not recognize Russian sovereignty over the four new territories in the former Ukrainian provinces. So they are not entirely in the Russian camp.
Yeah, so basically it's important to know that for a long time, let's say 20, 30 years, the authorities in Serbia didn't listen to the people. So while the people are very anti-EU, the authorities are, as I said, they have relations with NATO. They are pushing towards membership in the EU. On the other hand, they have this policy, which is like we have a very famous saying in Serbian, sitting on two chairs. So they try to balance the relations. They want, okay, they have some economic benefits from trade with Russia, for example, with oil, with gas. Also with China, we have some Chinese factories here in Serbia. But again, majority of of the times, and majority of investments in Serbia, majority of economy, and especially our politics is dictated by the West. So the Western share is much larger than the Eastern one. Again, I needed to point out a few examples. For example, regarding DPRK, we even don't have embassy of DPRK in Serbia, and vice versa. Also, there was never support or any solidarity with DPRK. On the other hand, we have very big problem with South Korean company called Yura that produces car cables, and we had a lot of repression against workers with this company. Even this year we had a strike, and actually our party managed with comrades from South Korea to organize a protest against management of Yura in Seoul in South Korea. Regarding Cuba, we have good relations. We vote against the blockade every time. But again, for example, we declared the need for visa for Cuban citizens in order to. So we have a visa requirement for Cuban citizens. I think from 2022 or 23. And the reason why we have this is to align our immigration policy with the policy of European Union. Also, for example, Palestine, we have relations with the state of Palestine. We have a Palestinian embassy. Our party cooperates very much with Palestinian embassy. But also our country sends weapons to Israel, and on television you can see a lot of Zionist propaganda, even on state television. So, diplomatically we have relations with the East, but when it comes to like the actual practical things, we are 90% on the West.
Right. I also heard recently, I haven't been able to verify this, so yeah, if you don't have a comment on this, that's okay. But I heard about how recently Serbia has also been sending weapons to Azerbaijan, which in my view is basically an appendix of NATO. Do you know anything about relations between Serbia and Azerbaijan?
We have relations. I know that there are some monuments to president of Azerbaijan in the center of Belgrade. But again, these weapons, it's quite logical that we are sending it to Azerbaijan, because we know what is our masters, who are our masters, and also our ruling party, our bourgeoisie, they are using opportunity to make money. So for them, sending weapons to Israel or to Azerbaijan or to I don't know, Ukraine or so on, they don't have problem with that because they're making money. So
right,
why not? Yeah.
Right. So before we get into the recent situation, then I have one more question about geopolitics, because there's, I believe, some sort of diplomatic friction between Iran and Serbia, because Iran takes the pro-Bosnian line on the Yugoslav war, because I believe they view this as an aggression against Muslims and see it through that lens rather than an imperialist attack on an anti-imperialist country. So I believe that there's some diplomatic friction there, and I believe, I think it makes sense this way, that Serbia would support Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan is in many ways an outpost of Israel as well, a spying outpost towards Iran. So in what ways do you see Iran playing a role in Serbian foreign policy?
Yes, well, currently Iran is not that important for politics in Serbia. It's relatively far away. Also, they can use excuse for being against Iran because of Iran's position on situation in Bosnia, on crimes against the Muslim population, and so on. But our government doesn't focus much on Iran. Within the Middle East, apart from Azerbaijan and also Israel, they are focused on United Arab Emirates. For example, a lot of investment came from there.
All right, so then let's get into the recent events. So from what I understand, a few weeks or months ago, there's been a collapse at a train station, killing 15 people, and now there's protests. So one thing I find difficult to understand outright is, why is there so much time in between? Why did it take so long before it sparked protests? And one thing I also wonder is, does this collapse in some way relate to the privatization scheme? So either it's bad maintenance because of austerity or because of privatization. So can you unpack this a little bit?
Yes. Just for the sake of clarity, this collapse happened on the 1st of November, so almost 2 months have passed, and I must explain how this project has been carried out. So, in the project of renovation of the train station in Novi Sad, it's the second largest city in Serbia, was the part of renovation of the entire railway network between Belgrade, Novi Sad, and also Subotica, which is in the Hungarian borders. So the Chinese companies did build the high-speed rail tracks between these cities, and the liberal opposition used this in the first days and after the accident, after the tragedy, to target the Chinese company. But after more research and after when people actually researched what happened, the construction works on the train station was done by a Serbian private company that is connected to the ruling party. So again, the private Serbian bourgeoisie basically killed 15 people in the in the train station. Actually, the Chinese company was warning the authorities in Serbia that the renovation of this part of the roof are not carried out as properly, but our ruling party and the people who are in charge ignored this because they wanted to finish it as soon as possible, and so on. Again, for the protests, actually the protests started very shortly after the collapse, and at that first time they were so first of all, people went to the streets because they were angry. They are generally angry with a lot of policies of the ruling party, and they took to the street to express grievances, to express their anger against the government. And at that first time, the opposition parties tried to organize these protests. But the crucial moment came after students started blockading universities, and basically students decided not to allow opposition parties or any parties to actually take over, at least in the forefront, to take over the protests. So that is when the students actually managed to take over the universities, to make blockades. That is the point where these protests started being more massive.
So to understand, the university students, they wanted to keep political parties, even opposition political parties, away from the protests?
Yes, because opposition parties are very unpopular in Serbia, and basically every protest that happened that was organized by opposition parties died out very soon. Also, a lot of opposition parties, despite being nominally against the government, are actually working for the government. And for example, on these first protests, there were some people who tried to make them look as they're pro-Western. So, for example, they took flag of the European Union or some liberal symbols that are recognizable in Serbia, and that is something that repels people from these protests. But fortunately, now when students organized, they managed to expel, not allow these kind of provocations either from opposition or from the people who work for the government and try to infiltrate the protests.
Right. So this is a change that happened recently, so that's why it's become bigger, you say. In the meantime, since the beginning of November until last week, there were continuously small protests, or did it die down and it flared up again?
What is the chronology? Basically, the student blockade started from around the beginning of December, and actually every week and later every day you had a 15-minute blockade. So from 11:52, which is the time when the roof of the station collapsed, you had in every city, mostly around the universities and faculties, people go at the crossroads and they stand for 15 minutes in sign of grievance and solidarity with the victims. So these kind of actions actually became more massive. One thing that actually also led to people joining the protests, and we had a very big, one of the biggest protests in history on Sunday, was the fact that the pro-government people, mostly hired by the ruling party itself, tried to break these protests. So we even had attempts of people to run over the protesters with their cars. We had a lot of violence against the protesters, a lot of provocations, and that basically united people in their resistance against not just government policies, but also against these kind of let's say crimes against the people.
Right. So these protests, they started around this collapse, but it seems that there's like more brewing underneath the surface. So what would you say, in a more general sense, these protests are about, and are there clear demands made by the protest movement?
Yes. So as I said, people are generally fed up with this government, with corruption, and the main demands of the students are for all people to be who are responsible to be persecuted, because there were a lot of protections of the people responsible. Also for all documentations to be presented, and for these provocators that try to run over the people on the streets and so on, all of them to be arrested. We had also the fourth demand, that was the 20% increase of the for the education purposes for university, the increase of the budget. Our party and the comrades that are that are on universities participate in these blockades and support them. But again, we are always trying to make these protests more about class situation. So, for example, because these are students, we want to push these protests also to be in favor of free education, in favor of rejecting the Bologna Declaration. Unfortunately, at this moment, majority of students that participate don't have this developed class consciousness. So they understand that responsible people needs to be arrested. They understand that this government is very bad, very corrupted, but they still don't have this class conscious of actually fighting for more economic rights. Let's say, of course, political struggle is important. Struggle against this hegemony of the ruling party is important, and it's good that they managed to isolate opposition parties. But from our perspective, we are trying to push them more for their own class interests.
Right. What I have seen so far in Western commentary about basically the protest on Sunday is that this is a protest against the government and specifically and in favor of basically European values, they would say. And they put this in the same category as the protests going on in Georgia right now and the recent protest in Slovakia by the opposition over the Prime Minister Robert Fico going to Russia. But is this an accurate characterization?
I don't think so, because majority of people that participate, as I said, which is a general sentiment in the people, are against European Union. As I said previously, when the opposition tried to make these protests more pro-European, the people rejected them. Of course, you always have some people that are, and people that will go to media are mostly opposition students that belong to the opposition parties, and then they can speak about European values and such things. But the situation on terrain is that people are just fed up with this government. It's a problem that you don't have like a more clear ideological line, in a sense that these are not anti-imperialist protests or so on, but they are not pro-European in their nature either.
Okay, so first let's get into when these kinds of protests happen, and from what I've seen so far, it very much looked to me like a color revolution attempt. So to what extent do you think that Western funding or NGOs are involved in organizing this, maybe in the background because of the public image that the EU and NATO has, but do you think they play a role?
They certainly do play some role, but this role is much less significant compared to the protests we previously had in Serbia that were more pro-Western. And I think the main difference here is that this is a very large number of people. I think that the opposition and the NGOs didn't expect to have such large number of people, and I think that fortunately they don't have capacity to really control and overtake these protests.
And if they succeed, let's say, so the explicit goals are what you just mentioned, but in the background, when such protest movements are mobilized, there's always the possibility, like, will this discontent, which is being expressed right now, translate into a collapse of the government? Do you think maybe not in the short term, but this protest movement could ultimately lead to this. And if this happens, what do you think will come in the aftermath? Will you get like a better kind of, well, you could say economic nationalist government or whatever, or will you get a more liberal pro-European government?
Yes, well, unfortunately, at this moment, I think that every government that will come after this one will be no better, but not much worse than the current one. So it will most likely be more pro-Western, but as I said, the West is also very supportive of Vucic, and Vucic is very supportive of the West. But for the working class in Serbia, I think that in this point it is good. Maybe not like in this year or early next year, but like in the longer term, it is good for this government to collapse, because it will create a vacuum for several years, and the bourgeoisie in Serbia will need to, reconfigure their forces when this government falls. So this period can be used and should be used by the working class to further strengthen itself, to strengthen its struggle, and also, as I said, for their economic interests, but also against imperialism. So this is the period that is ahead of us, and that needs to be used by the workers and the working people in general.
Right. So, if we consider that, Western influence plays some role in this, does it make sense to support the protests up to that point? So, of course, it makes sense to make economic demands like what is being done, but maybe to draw some comparisons, even communists in, for example, Russia or Venezuela, who are critical against the government in terms of domestic economic policy, they say, okay, domestically we are opposition, but when it comes to an imperialist attack against our country, then in that case we stand firmly behind our government. Because if you don't have a country, you don't even need to talk about constructing socialism in your country. So to what extent does this comparison apply to the situation in Serbia right now?
Actually, not much, because Venezuelan government or Russian government are anti-imperialist ones, and they both of these governments have a firm stance against anti-imperialism. Russia is even fighting a war currently against Western imperialism. Serbia, or let's say Serbian government, is not attacked by imperialism. They work with them very well. Okay, there are people that would like, and some NGOs that would like to work even better with imperialism. And if these protests turn out to be pro Western, pro imperialist, of course, our party and our comrades will not support them anymore. But I think that majority of the people will not support them anymore if they become openly pro Western. On the other hand, as I said, currently you don't have this kind of hegemony of the liberal parties, and our comrades are working for this not to happen. So we are using these protests also as a battlefield against the ruling party, but also against the pro-Western opposition.
Right. Okay. Recently, also, I saw a news article that Belgrade is going to make public transportation free. Does this have anything to do with the protest? Could this be like a way to take some pressure off, because of course I think student populations are especially happy with this. Is there any connection?
Yes, this has everything to do with protests actually. So basically, this is one good thing that came up from the protests. So basically, the government is trying because they are afraid of the students, of the number of people, and so on. So they're now trying to, how to say, bribe the students, so, and the general population. So some of these policies are, we agree with them. For example, making public transportation free in Belgrade, but we know that they have been done just to pacify the people. They also had other policies directed towards young people. For example, some better conditions when you take a loan to buy an apartment. Fortunately, majority of students and young people didn't buy into this, because again, these conditions are better, but again, they're aware that they will need to pay off the debt for like 30-40 years. So again, it doesn't make any significant difference. So the government is trying also, for example, because a lot of high school kids also joined the protest. They now declared early winter holiday in order to stop the young ones, the high school kids participate in the protest. But fortunately, these measures didn't have much effect.
Could this also be used by the protest movement to actually energize it? Because it shows that there's actually power in effective protests, because you can win concessions that way.
Yes, exactly. And also, there is one important thing in Serbian mentality. It is called inat. It means that when someone tries to like buy you or something, you go against them for the sake of going against them. And so basically, this inat actually is very present now within students who the government tried to buy with these concessions.
Right. Okay, so finally, what is the way forward, moving on from these protests or in these protests? What should the protest movement do, and what is your party doing to bring this in a positive direction, and where do you think it will lead?
Yeah. So first of all, the students and the working class, the peasants and so on, who are also now joining, post workers and so post office workers and so on. We need to use this protest to gain as much as we can for ourselves, also to weaken this current government structure as much as we can. One important thing regarding the universities is that we need to change the form of, let's say, student democracy in the universities, because currently we have student parliaments that were actually invented, let's say, by the liberal opposition after year 2000. They were introduced by them. And a lot of students in these students' parliaments are very corrupt, and a lot of times they don't fight against students. So what we are fighting for, our party, is the delegate system, where every, let's say, class or every section of faculty can choose their own representatives that can be revoked at any time. If we manage to succeed in this reform of the university democracy, that is a huge win and huge opening field for future battles on students level. Also what is important, and I think that students together with professors are actually very good at, is the struggle against the proposed law for foreign universities to come to to actually open their classes in Serbia. So we are now also, this resistance is also part of this struggle. Again, to conclude, the main focus of the people should be gaining better material conditions, gaining better position of their class, especially of the students politically, and opening ground and preparing for the struggles in the future, especially in the context of bringing down the Serbian Progressive Party.
Thank you for this elaboration on the situation. Is there anything you want to shout out where people can find the social media links of your organization or anything?
Yes, I want to greet you and also all the peoples from Netherlands and also from around the world that will listen to this podcast. It was my pleasure to participate, and you can find basically our party and our youth organization are very present in social media, in Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, on Twitter. So maybe I can share with you some links that you can put down below in the video.
Absolutely, they will be in the description. So yeah, thank you very much.